Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's special guest is Andrew Crosby. We met several years ago during a global regenerative collab gathering, which is all about the regenerative culture and building it to help sustain our future and even create a sense of thrivability in it as well. So what Andrew does is he cultivates pure innovation for a regenerative development transition. He's the founder and executive director of Third Horizon Earth, which is a community-informed and supported tool for regenerative development pioneers. He is a partner in the Social Complexity Lab in Geneva, and he is also the last time we ran into each other was in the Co-Creating a World That Works for All symposium recently. I know you're going to love the conversation. We'll be right back. Stick around. Andrew, it is such a pleasure to have you here and a long time coming. We've been dancing around the internet for several years now. Great to see you, my brother.
It's great to see you too, Zen. Nice to actually catch up and talk. I'm looking forward to our discussion. I think we got a lot of directions to go. So yeah.
Yeah, wherever we're moved to go, that's kind of where we end up going. And it's a collaborative effort. It's this generative conversation that emotes and emerges from the intention to connect, in my opinion. Uh,
Mm.
Connect and expand, possibly. Now, our theme, if you will, is to uncover knowledge. That's why we call it apocalyptic chats. And in that, our direction is talking about the inner experiences that others have and how they developed and what they were like, because we're bereft of talking about that in the other world because people think we're good, a bit weird, crazy, something, maybe even insane. And yet, from my conversations, these are proving to be really salient in their poignancy coming out of our last fiasco and in co-creating a new normal. So I appreciate that in how you have been uh, doing this work already, Andrew. And in light of that, let's back that up a little bit because we got a lot of places to go. How did you first um, understand that there was a greater connection that you had to life and the world and others?
A good question. Like how far back do you go, right?
When do you first, because most of us have this capacity, if not experience, as children. Not everybody does because the household environments are different. However, we're all brought in with this capacity to be curious and connected.
Yeah. And connected to others and connected to nature. I mean,
Mhm.
that would be childhood for me also. So I grew up in the middle of the US, Minnesota,
Mm.
and spent a lot of time outdoors, a lot. And when I was older, people would sometimes ask me, where do you want to be? And one of the questions, the way that people answered that often was, I want to be in a city or in a theater or whatever. I want to be outdoors. I want to be out in nature. And so that's kind of one leg. That's the natural leg. And if you think about people, how we connect with people, my deepest connections were actually through my grandparents,
Mm.
who were amazing people. I knew 3 out of 4 of them really well, and one of them left a huge amount of documentation about his life. And so as a little kid, they were bringing me into all this history going back into the early part of the 1900s, and how they grew. And then as I started, I listened to those stories and got, I think, a lot of perspective about how different life was and how they approached these huge challenging things, all
Mhm.
the things from the wars, the depression, and so on.
Sure.
Uh, I also developed and started wondering, so what's going on in the world, right? And one of the things that really struck me was going to the funeral of Martin Luther King Jr., not to a service, not to the
Mhm.
actual funeral, but in Minneapolis, and seeing a few people there, and thinking, wow, like this is something different. Why are we here? I started learning about who he was, and feeling this really peculiar thing, like why, so what's going on here? And Minneapolis was where, at least around most of Minneapolis, except for a little corner, which is not so different from the way things are now in some ways, was all white.
Mhm.
And so I was trying to reconcile, what is it? Why are these people in this plight? So I guess I would say that that was a really formative experience for me.
Sure. I had a
Uh,
similar experience growing up, small town, Indiana, rural community, bedroom community for auto workers mostly and farmers, uh, surrounding it, all white.
mhm.
I longed for diversity.
But I get, yeah, and me too. But I get this sensitization to people's stories, largely from my grandparents,
Hmm.
right? That curiosity has kept going. So that's been like kind of a through line. Like I just like you do, I like to hear where people come from. Like how did you originate? What changed for you? When did it change? And that's, in some ways, that's a lot of what my work is now, listening to people who are trying to do something differently and then understand, what is that?
Sure. And like we both have studied, okay, we want to be helpful. Well, how do you do that? Well, you first got to understand people. So ask questions, shut up, listen. Right? Now, there's still that, okay, but in, conversation, it's like you're triggered, you got to say stuff, you got to listen. There's this rapid fire exchange, and New Yorkers are great at that. You move further west, not so much. And so, right. Now, I don't know if that's a ubiquitous thing all over the world, depending on places and regions and things of that nature. However, there's this overall, you got to get to know somebody first before suggesting anything.
Mm, yeah, for sure. I think there's this like another piece that occurs to me as well. When you have an opportunity to encounter people, you can find amazing things. I'll just give you an example. I was a big bicycler when I was in my teens.
Hmm.
I rode across the U.S. a couple times, from Minnesota to the East Coast, so half the country.
That's a long journey. I went from Indianapolis to Mackinac Island as a teen. So similar stuff.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice,
loved
nice.
it.
I love that. So one of the things I did though is on one of those trips is I would just stop by farms and I'd say, can I just sleep here for the night? And usually the first question was, well, do you smoke? And I didn't smoke, so the answer is no. And then, yeah, okay, you can stay here. And then usually I'd get a meal, right? So it became this like little interaction that
Mhm.
grew, and I was just amazed at the generosity of people often to,
Absolutely. And those are the roots
to
of our society that have been, it seems, just covered up.
yeah, yeah,
People are really kind by nature in most cases.
yeah. So I found that a lot. And so that curiosity is just it's always been with me.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
you've got a direct experience now that, others, and this is funny, and I know you're hip to this, is that we project a lot. We make these nebulous global statements about how things are and how opinionated we are and projecting all that on society without really having that groundswell, if you will, of direct experience from being in it, right? We have this cursory look from our own particular bubble.
Yeah.
And we don't seek to expand that bubble. Now, speaking of expanding bubbles, when you were a kid, how did that connection with nature and your grandparents and your experience bring into your consciousness at least hmm, maybe a series of questions or contemplations that you had that helped you proceed in your own investigation of life?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would, I think what at the base, some of that is just like developing empathy,
Hmm.
right? Listen, and you listen to what's happening with someone else. So, I mean, that's a lifelong journey. But I think that uh, just starting to listen in that way made me wonder increasingly why certain people were worse off and others were better off, and how, how we could have equity in the
So,
world.
so obvious that you could sit.
So I got a little drop out there, Zen.
Okay. Did you notice anything that was so glaring in your observations that you couldn't miss it?
Inequity, injustice, and what to do about it. But as in terms of insight, I had empathy around those things, and I was like, okay, but why is this? Why do we need this?
Hmm.
Why can't we be better? Not just in a not a technical, that's not a technical question. It's like, why can't we do differently in a way that has better outcomes? So I think yeah, that's been part of my journey, is thinking about
Hmm.
that. How do we
Was you were growing up in your teens and on the bicycle and experiencing those kinds of things, did you have any discussions with your friends you hadn't met yet
I
on these
can't,
topics?
yeah, I would say teachers along the way. So I was always curious. So I would stop and talk to people. Um, and so I would say, maybe, I don't know if that's in the sense you're thinking about, but I always enjoyed the detour, thinking and hearing from people, the traveling circus of people who were, on the border in Canada, and why this group of young people were creating a circus and going around, or, you know, the bagpiper in his backyard in New York State. Where's that from? Like,
Hmm.
just that curiosity was always part of me. So that was actually a very formative for me, because I was curious about almost everything. So I can't say I started, in a particular way, right?
Sure.
I started doing what was interesting. So I just walk out the door and go someplace, right?
And
Uh,
it sounds like you were encouraged by your parental nuclear family to do so. And that's a real gift, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, because we're not, as we grow up, that curiosity is almost, I don't want to say beaten out of us, but definitely um, pushed down by societal behaviors and values.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, partly it was supported, and partly I just did it, right?
Mhm.
That
Didn't
was
know you couldn't, right?
that was the 70s, right?
Yeah.
60s and 70s, we could walk out the door and disappear for a day and nobody would notice. And that was
And
okay.
trust that we were safe.
Right. And trust that we were safe. So we had a tremendous amount of freedom. I did anyway. a
Mhm.
tremendous amount of freedom, mostly because I didn't abuse it, so I didn't screw it up. At least I always got back, right? So, so
Occasional
that,
scrape and bump and bruise, and then
yeah,
maybe a broken bone, but safe.
yeah, I survived myself,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I think those, as I grew up, then those explorations started, they just started going in different directions, really. So I did a bunch of different things just
Did
because
you notice in doing those bunch of things that there was a similar theme or some recursive pattern that would become obvious or at least available to notice, not necessarily explore, and yet over time, the opportunity to explore it?
Yeah, in a sense, it's that curiosity. I did things though that were like radically different. So I went and I worked as a merchant marine for a few years after high school. I worked in an art auction house for a while. I ended up working for political consultants for a while. I led bicycle tours for a while. So I did all these really, really different things.
So what was the curiosity that came in, and I love how you did that. What was the overriding factor or the curiosity that you had in each? Was it just you saw something that had interest and you wanted to get further involved and so just did so?
It's like, I mean, it's like climbing up a hill for a better view,
Hmm.
right? And but in doing so, that's not just a view of what is that work, but who are the people around it? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? How do I fit?
Right.
All those things. I spent
And not only how you fit, how you belong,
yeah, right, right.
or if.
Yeah, or if, right, like I'm not sure I like to those things. I did belong while I was there, but I can't say that I necessarily belonged enough to want to stay there.
Sure.
Yeah,
But you make an interesting distinction there, because it's life is like cycles, rhythms, patterns, and nonlinear at that. We think it might be linear, but you just take a look around, it's not. However, with the various things that you learned and the levels and the layers and the deepening of relationships, as well as the deepening of the understanding of that arena, that gave you the opportunity to kind of feel it out. You mentioned something earlier in a comment that you made to me. You use sense and think back to back. So the interesting thing I've found is we can't think our way through a system built on vibration, which we know it to be now because of quantum physics. We have to sense our way through. And we're just learning that. There's some of us who adapted and learned and didn't really know any different. So we didn't really know how to describe the process. It was just natural to us, kind of like
mm,
what you did. Now, in your exploration in those various areas, what was the impetus to what you want to find out? What did you want to experience going into it? Or was it just a global, oh, I want to find out more about this area?
yeah. Some of it was that, right, and some of it was not knowing. So just being open, like I mean, like having a better view or like taking a different road. What is this?
Mhm.
Why? So I
And
worked
did
as
you notice a process that that you became aware of or became apparent in, for instance, where you put your attention, intention, and interaction toward open doors you didn't imagine would be there to begin with?
yeah, although I think like where you're going, but like it took me what I did
Hmm.
to gain perspective into what I was doing, right?
Hmm.
So so I can't say I had the perspective while I was doing some of those things. But for example, if I hadn't spent a couple years working on merchant ships, I wouldn't have been motivated in the same way to go to college. I wouldn't have been motivated in the same way to do some of the things I did afterwards. And working on merchant ships was fun, but there wasn't a lot of, and it was good camaraderie. That was
Right.
great.
Well, it's hard work too.
It's hard work, but I, then I got to this point where, but I saw another life, good people. But then I thought, well, there needs to be something more for me. Like,
Mhm.
so that piece that emerged, at least for me, started collecting around this, taking this understanding of what was happening in the world and seeing if there was an opportunity to change it in some way, to make it better, to help smooth things, to help create tools,
And
products,
then
and
the
so.
automatic question of, okay, well, how, right? Where do I need to be? Who do I need to know? What do I need to know?
Yeah.
And this is why I'm asking about that process, because it seems to me, having listened to many folks over the years, that there is a similar process with all of just, there's this curiosity, first of all, the desire to be involved, to find out more, to be helpful. And then the universe kind of puts things in front of you for you to do that. Serendipitous synchronicities, those kinds of things that we often think are coincidences. And then as the further you dive into understanding consciousness and reality and physics and how things are crafted, right, co-created, the more this apparent order appears of how these things work, and that there is this capacity we have as co-creators to integrate with what we don't understand yet know is operational.
Mm.
Whether we want to call it the giver of data, God, or something else.
I mean, so in my experience, so I like what I would describe as my evolution is being fortunate to have great mentors.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been a student and I've had some really great mentors, including some people that I really didn't like in the end, but I learned something from them, right?
Sure.
So I'm not saying they were they're not all the perfect teachers. Some of those teachers were problematic for me, but
Well,
I learned.
sure, and you
Right.
learn more by working through opposition than you do through confirmation bias.
It can be, right, right. It can be. So less so than sort of seeing my path. I had teachers, and so like one of the key things was, well, am I learning something here? Am I getting skills that are interesting, that are satisfying to this part of my life that would help me do something that was meaningful, meaning more than just making money. For me, that was important. Do something
Sure.
meaningful.
Well, we got to survive, but that's not the
Yeah,
end all, right?
yeah, right. Well, yeah, and that was sort of my transition from doing things that were more about making money into, fortunately, I had the opportunity to go do something that was change oriented. Just the way you say, it could have been complete serendipity, except that it just happened just like that,
Well,
right?
sure. As you go, you set your intention, you put your attention and interaction towards something, and then there's this being present, right? Harvesting the past however you need to in order to nourish the future in process, because you don't want to drag the baggage. There's no carry-ons on this flight, right? And then being able to
If you're lucky.
well, most of us, because I mean, we're in a global traumatized period right now, and we're trying to come out of that as effectively as possible, it
Mm.
seems. And yet there's this leading edge, if you will, of knowing that there's something, of being able to conceive, maybe believe, and even have an experience of how that feels in what you're looking for, whether it resonates or not. And that's kind of this gut level feeling that it's like we're led, whether, second guessing ourselves. It's that first guess that you need to pay attention to, because
Mm,
that's you, your infinite, like the Vedas say, we're all divine threads connected to source, capable of God consciousness. And that thread contains infinite intelligence for us specifically. And so it knows everything, can share everything. We just got to ask the right questions of it and be present for the answers. And those come in various forms. One of them is this sense of resonance with the query and the direction in which one needs to go. Now, I'm curious about how you took that, if I've explained that, then making some sense out of it, and your move into politics, what you saw the opportunity, or how you wanted to engage and perhaps even influence.
right. Yeah. So, I mean, that was an opportunity for me. I was selling wine at the time, right? So that's what I was doing. Selling wine in New York City it was a lovely thing to do.
Sure.
But I got this opportunity through someone I knew who knew somebody who was starting a project, and they needed a first employee. And I was just at that stage, having I was in my last year of college, and I interned for them before that was really an idea. And then they called me back when they wanted to do this project. Again, I had great teachers. So these were people who were political consultants who wanted to create the first national daily news service on US politics, which is what we did in the 80s. And I must say that, like, actually that, you see a lot of those things now, and part of me says, well, that wasn't necessarily the best thing for the world to do. Speed things up, make them more attractive in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But what we were also doing was trying to understand a context of where things were moving and provide that context to people who cared about it in a way that meant something to them and was entertaining at the same time. And of course, that could be people who are in politics, who are in electoral politics, but it could be people who were with environmental organizations or human rights organizations
Mm-hmm.
and so on. So
Interested parties.
yeah, part of what I learned there was this methodology of helping people to understand an issue as it's evolving, and to carry that into services that would be, that would be ideally be useful. But
Mm-hmm.
as I say, that part of that evolution of US politics, I think, has not been that productive, because it went in ways that were maybe inevitable, but not necessarily good for deeper dialogue.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
And the escalation also, when things are moving fast, it's hard for you to slow down. And, most recent adage in the organizational development, slow down to move fast, right?
Mhm.
And, pay attention and be mindful, all of those kinds of things. Now, do you also, looking at that escalation, we're going through a tremendous, I'll say, escalatory period right now with how AI is moving, and it's it's got a lot of people scared. And then it's got a lot of people like, whoo, this is great as well. And yet it's still forcing us incrementally to speed things up, because now we have the access to things that reduce our time and effort in achieving things. Not necessarily everything, a lot.
Yeah.
And so how do you see that moving and dancing with this emergent quality that seems to be coming out of the recent past, in that reconnection with others, and that self-examination that seems to be driving people to look for more, to be better, to connect with themselves and really who they are, what they believe in, what they want to do, where they want to go, and to do it in a more, and I'll just use the term mindful way, where we haven't been that mindful in the past.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about, so I was just talking about context. Part of that context for me is understanding yourself and others. So like, if you ask me what I like, the shorthand for what I've spent a lot of time doing is creating things that help people understand their own interest in the context of the public interest.
Mm.
So that's more than context, right? It's about situating yourself and understanding others and using some kind of contextual framework to get that. And you could say, well, AI is perfect for that, right? AI is going the right direction. One could say that. I tend to think that it's kind of dangerous, actually. Not entirely all the time, but if we think about how do we,
Depends on who's using it, right? And the
yeah,
intent they have.
well, how do we understand others? Okay, so
Mhm.
so if you turn off the very first sense when I look at you and you look to the AI and it says Zen is starting to smile, but you better think about how you're going to address him, right? Okay, versus if I just look at you and I might get it wrong, but I might get it more right, and I've changed myself and I might change you, versus coming off this prompt, right? So the prompt scares me because even though it's probably more right more of the time, I'm ceding my right and my ability to develop that skill. Like, when was the last time you used a map? A map,
So
paper
what I
map.
hear you talking about is critical thinking.
Yeah, it's critical thinking and feeling
Yeah.
like we're human, we're face to face, right?
Mhm.
So
Now I have noticed a lot of emotional intelligence embedded in AI. And and yes, I see the potential of it. I'm always one that looks, I'm like the eternal optimist, right? I always look for the good and focus on that, and the battle will take care of itself, because it won't last, because people won't let it ultimately. It may, rise for a little bit. However, things refine themselves over time. It's like the universe. And Howard Bloom and I had a conversation. I didn't get it recorded, unfortunately, but he is a proponent that the second law of thermodynamics is incorrect. Systems don't fall into entropy. They refine over time. That's the way the universe is built. Now, man-made systems, on the contrary, look how many empires have fallen. So those kinds of things are true. That's the paradox, right? In truth, that there are two almost disparative aspects of it that are present.
yeah,
So how do you see this natural emergent factor that you're aware of? And I know you see that because of your involvement in the regenerative movement, and how your work in bringing people to that new understanding is so ever present in it. How does that, or do you see that emergent quality bridging this speed of achievement with the slowness of understanding?
I'm not really sure how to answer that.
That's a tough question.
I,
As I was asking, is like, how the hell could you answer that? And yet there was the question.
yeah, is where's our, I think the question for me is, how are we cultivating the essence of what it means to be human first?
Mhm.
Uh, and and if we're attending to that, and we're developing those skills. And I was going to give you the example of a map, and maybe that's not one element of being human, but it's part of the tactile world that we've somehow ceded to technology. So a lot of people don't know how to read a map now.
Right.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter. I actually think not necessarily map reading, but human reading matters, right?
Sure.
Interconnection matters. So for me, the most fundamental thing, if we go to the crises that we're in now, the most fundamental challenges are the human ones. They're not the technical ones.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're the technical ones. I mean, we've almost got, if you look at historical things, we've got 1.7 times food being produced in this world than is needed now. We got big distribution problems, but there's a lot of food. It's just not getting to the right places. So
and you bring up something that I've heard several times that's in complete opposition to this scarcity mentality, right? That, oh, we got to call the population, we've got to reduce population growth, we got to do all these things so we don't have enough land, food, water, all that kind of stuff. And that's just not true.
Yeah, it cannot be true. We could make it not true, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can make our choices. So why are we suffering from? Why are people starving?
Right.
Those are choices.
We don't care enough. We're too busy with the running agenda, which is profit over people and planet.
Yeah, but I don't think it's only okay. I don't think it's only greed. Don't think so. I think we're also
true. There's several factors in it.
There's tremendous inertia. So, like, some people assume that the people who came before us are evil because they developed corporations and so on and so forth, right? And
they did the best they could with what they knew how to do.
they did the best what they could. Yeah. And so, like, we're societally in this learning journey. Then I think so it means not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my response on AI is like, well, there's some fundamental things that we should get right about ourselves so that we can use some of those tools. If we don't get it right about ourselves and the way we organize ourselves and our values, how we collaborate, how we communicate, recognizing that we could have abundance in a lot of things and redesigning for that, then we're not going to use those tools properly. Those tools will be used like they're being used right now to strengthen monopolies, to strengthen extraction, right? So to do a lot of interesting, good things, a lot of amazing things being done, but also people are harnessing these tools in a way that's, I think, often not good for us societally.
Well, with standard deviations in the population bell curve, right? There's going to be those outliers. That's just part of, we've got the panoply of possibility throughout the population. And so there are going to be evidence of the ultimate best use and the ultimate worst use, just simply because that's what is, right? We've got to be able to recognize that, not get caught up in the concern or fear of it. And in my opinion, and perhaps let me ask rather than say, how do you think that's bridging and what effect might it have on our near future, such as with these gatherings like co-creating a world that works for all and those types of events?
So
did that question make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So we need to, look, if we accept or if we think that there's a possibility that we can do better, then what does it look like to do better? What does it look like to do better societally? And right now, a lot of people think we're doing worse. And there's a lot of evidence for that, right? There's climate change, biodiversity loss. I
which
mean,
kind of enforces the apathy.
yeah, I mean, tremendous numbers of people who are unhappy with the work world
Mhm.
and the potential for that, and they're convinced there's something better. So
And they're afraid of losing jobs to AI,
yeah, all that
not
stuff.
thinking about, oh, I've got the opportunity to learn something new and be
So
supported in that.
right, so how do we reach like so this is almost dead simple, right?
Mhm.
The things that society
Well, let's
looks
don't
like.
be dead. Let's be live simple.
Yeah, okay. It's as simple as that, let's
Yeah.
say, which is, you know, so many of the things that are billed as costs these days could be investments, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you take one, universal basic income, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect or whatever, but it's a good example, right? If you know, the people say, oh, we're wasting all that money. But when people get a sufficient amount of income, they're able to do things with that, right? And
Yeah, and the
yes,
stress comes down. There's not the anxiety, the health issues, all the kinds of things that go along with this fear of what am I going to do next to get what I need,
right.
right?
So there needs to be this sort of mind shift. There are already people out there, you and I know them, who are creating what I call beautiful things, right? They're
Mhm.
designing systems around land, or some of them are doing it in consumer goods, drinks and food
Mhm.
and so
And I'm
on.
trying to create a virtual model with planetary citizens.
Right. Yeah. So there are people who are creating these beautiful things. And for a lot of the mainstream world, they're going clunk, you're utopian or whatever.
Mhm.
But what these people are doing is trying to create value across systems. They're trying to make, sure, they're trying to make a living too.
Gosh,
But
a holistic view?
yes, horrible, isn't it? Right. But okay, so and here's one of the catches, because a lot of people go, oh, yeah, you mean communism, right? No, no, that's not what it is.
Mm-mm.
Okay, we move beyond communism,
It's collaborativism.
capitalism,
Collaborativism.
collaborativism. Yeah. So we have tools. We don't,
Collaborism?
you coined it.
Trademark that one.
Yeah. But we have tools like, okay, we're, you know, I mean, look at this book, Radical Markets. Okay. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
seen it, right? And the authors basically say, look, we're babes in the woods when we thought about markets. Don't get rid of markets. You could design markets for equity outcomes.
Sure. Well, they
Or
just changed recently. The SEC introduced, I think this is a couple of years ago now, natural asset companies. Well,
Mhm.
what are those? Those are companies who are working to restore or rebuild or refine the environment
Right.
and to be helpful in that way. So now the green movement used to be kind of poo-pooed by, the regular market because it just didn't make sense because there wasn't any value in it for them. And now, because the shift in attention, it has value. And not only the shift in attention, the requirement or the need that we have globally of caring for our planet and people.
Yeah. It's I think that, you know, part of the way I view this is starting to weave a new fabric that is a really dramatically different narrative.
Mhm.
And there are losers in that, right? Like big time monopolists, the
Google just got dinged.
masters of the universe are going to have a hard time with this. But but if we start exploring and expanding the potential, and people are doing it now,
Mhm.
this is a big point for me. People are doing it all over the place, but they're working with one or two hands behind their back
Right.
because they don't have markets. They're trying to survive on, you know, the little bit of product, but maybe some carbon offsets or something, but nobody's paying them for better health outcomes, happier people, you know, things like this that have real societal value,
Sure.
right?
And oftentimes, so we were talking about silos earlier. And the amount of effort, time, energy put into these things when the pioneers are doing what they do, it's not a marketing facet, right? There's all of these other things surrounding it that they're unable because they don't have the support to accomplish, and they end up being a silo, even though that's not what their intention is.
Exactly. Yes, that's right. I mean, I think you're also saying this, the enabling environment is not supporting them. In fact, the enabling environment that we have, and by that I mean everything from government regulation to standards to the way that finance is done, all these things are now these days, they're all designed for a different kind of system.
Mm-hmm.
What would it look like if we started redesigning those enabling environment tools? Those are
Right.
essential because it's like flying against a headwind. You're just not going to go anywhere. Like if you want to be a regenerative farm in the US or in a big, in a big place, right? Where macro farming, this large scale monocropping is the deal.
Big farm
Good,
and not a
good luck.
PH.
Good luck. But why wouldn't we be supporting the smaller ones? Why wouldn't we be supporting them in the same way? Okay, the old logic was we don't have enough food. But
Right.
that's
Well, then you
longer.
got Monsanto that's suing farmers that happen to get some of their seeds spill over into their land.
Yeah. Well, that's also crazy, crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's just insane. And yet the corporate structure allows that to happen.
Yeah.
Uh,
The-
in this emergence, do you see that there's this um, that there's a desire to bring this imbalance at least into view a little better, to have the discussions, not necessarily knowing where we're going or what's available, just to be able to kind of like what Nora Bates is doing, Bateson is doing with the warm data workshops and getting people to, the warm data is expressing emotions, how you feel about stuff, and how that integration takes place organizationally, politically, regionally, nationally, community-wise. Fascinating work. Do you see that this is maybe a coming trend? I know it's not now because there's very few of them that's actually doing it. However, it makes sense.
So I think your question is there value in understanding these frameworks more clearly so we know where we are? I
Sure,
think
and
that's
having the advantage of being able to introduce these processes, kind of like what Sharma does with the theory U and Nora does with the warm
yeah.
data
I
workshops.
mean, they're certainly useful and interesting, and more people are doing them. I think that there's another layer. It's one that I've worked with a lot in my life that is not demand driven, but it does respond to what you're saying, which is, the example I just gave about the enabling environment. Okay,
Hmm.
well, 99% of the people you'll talk to will never mention that. They'll say, I've got a business, the business is trying to survive. If you talk to people in the mainstream, it's like, what can business do to solve our problems? Or don't
The
say government.
language isn't there yet.
Right. But it's more than the language. That visibility is not there yet, right?
Hmm.
The connections aren't. So one of the things that we're working on is trying to understand what those things look like and present them, maybe even before there's a demand for them. Why? Because it helps create a context of the system and situation that we're in. And there's a value to doing that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So are people interested? Yes. But right now, like, yeah, it's there.
Well,
This
there's
is
the concept to market, right? What's it going to take? What needs to be in place? How does it need to be framed? What kind of educational process is involved to introduce it? And is it something that can be smooth, or is it going to take some more in-depth training and understanding to really grok the concept even before it's implemented, even though to the creators or co-creators, it makes so much sense that it's almost a no-brainer.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So some of that is creating that link between the creators and everybody else
Hmm.
that helps people understand that this stuff, whatever it is, let's just call it regenerative. Although what I call it is, creating mutually beneficial synergies across disciplines or domains. So that for me is that's the key features. Like, is somebody trying to improve things across a discipline or a domain that's mutually beneficial
Hmm.
to humans or environment.
Sure.
And
Well, here's the other thing that this brought up just to me, as you just said that. It's like, okay, two different things, science and spirituality, right? They have been disparate for so long, and now they're starting to say the same thing. Quantum physics is demonstrating the understanding that the Vedas presented 15,000 years ago. So here's this, man, we've been waiting for a long time for this to happen, and yet it is now. So there's 15,000 years of prep work that we've had to even be able to have this new view of what reality might look like and our place and ability to navigate it. How do you see that basic? Because it's to me, it's innate. As a kid, you think about things and you start paying attention. You ask for stuff, it shows up. Well, it's a natural system. We don't give that credit, and we think we have to circumvent it as adults,
right.
right? So how do you see that new normal in the way we think coming to fruition, or do you?
Yes. I mean, the new normal that I would say coming into fruition has to do with the way that we're thinking and
Mhm.
designing our systems and living as groups of people. Um, for me, okay, so there's a lot of ways for that to happen. If you go out there, there are people doing tons of different things. So part of the answer is a lot of people have to do a lot of things.
Sure.
Okay. I think what we're doing with Third Horizon Earth is saying, okay, so there are these silos for various reasons, even in spite of the fact that people are designing integrative systems. So how can we start to help emerge these? How do we make them more visible? And by making them more visible, we make them more tangible, right?
Hmm.
They goes from fantasy to reality.
Right.
And that's a function too. That for me, I mean, it's not the only function. It couldn't exist without the people innovating, right? It couldn't exist
Sure.
without everybody doing
Sure.
everything else. But that
And
that piece of that visibility, creating, understanding what is the essence of this innovation, novelty, how are they doing it? Why are they doing it? And then sharing that has some value in adoption, in making
absolutely.
something that looks like magic or hocus pocus or utopianism actually be real.
Right. Well, magic is science, and we don't know yet. Um, so as we understand, as we begin to peel back the layers and understand the science, or at least explore it, how how broad do you see the spectrum of view? Is it still materialistic oriented, or is it more inclusive of the esoteric?
Oh, it has to be inclusive. It has to be more inclusive. I mean, one of like for me, and this is just part of my evolution, but when I thought about sustainable development, so I've been in the sustainable development space forever. I mean,
Hmm.
pretty much most of my professional life in some way. And I always thought, okay, well, this is what we have. But always in my mind, there was this kind of beautiful synergy of things that just work like nature, right?
Yeah.
And when I discovered this regenerative development space, I was like, oh, thank God, somebody's actually onto this, right?
Sure.
And
Oh, and David's, when he first introduced the Regenerative Collab, December of 2019, as if there was this understanding that, oh, next month we're gonna need, right? The world's gonna open to the possibility of people gathering.
yeah,
Which is what happened. That, those that seemed to have this awareness began looking for each other and finding groups because we were curious. It's like, okay, I can't be the only one.
yeah. So that's
Where's the other me? It's like in La Catch, yeah. It means I am another you. Where's the other me? Where
yeah.
are the other me's in this? And
But
it's just a fascinating journey. Now, in this fascination of the emergence of this, what do you find fuels you and could fuel others in a moment to mother, right? In a moment to moment, it may not have been a faux pas, in a moment to moment process. And what are the, maybe thoughts, feelings, in short process that you go through internally to prepare yourself to be more present?
yeah, in a moment to moment sense, um, look, we're in a system now that's not encouraging that, right? I think, our society today, by and large, is not encouraging that. But there are a lot of people who are wanting to think differently, who want to connect, just like you're talking about. They exist. And I think there are a lot more of them than we see. So part of it is paying attention, listening to people, looking for opportunities to connect. Those things, I think, it's hard also, like the reason I make the point about the system that we're in is a system we constructed, and it's also not necessarily rewarding those longer term kinds of relationships.
Oh, because we're
Yeah.
only concerned with short-term gain still.
Yeah. Well,
Our society is built on, what can I have as quick as I can have it?
people still have to eat. If I don't get that
Yep.
job, somebody else is going to get it. If I don't make that, that's a system we're in.
Hmm.
That's, you could say that's human too. Human history has been like that.
Sure.
But there have been different perspectives on human history too, right? I mean, so
And history is written by the victors, right?
yeah. But when I think about if you go back to the Romantics, right, the late 1700s, right, there was a really holistic view of the world, right? Like, so von Humboldt thought of the world as deeply integrated, right? So that existed. There was von Humboldt days, right, all over the world because he was so influential. Right? And then we went down another path. We went down the Darwin plus path, right? And so why am I saying that?
Different kind of programming.
Because I think that the way people think and act and feel can change. It has been different in other eras, just like it has been different in other societies. And it's not necessarily one or the other, right? I mean, it's not only indigenous societies, as far as I understand. There's some indigenous societies that went really well and some that didn't, right? So it's human. What did they do? How did they do it? Those are things we need to learn because we're at this place right now that we're in crisis. Everybody's in crisis.
Absolutely.
And so not only do we have to think differently, but we have the opportunity to. We have abundance. Abundance is possible. We have created the tools that can enable us to do that, right? Why didn't everybody go to the 15-hour work or whatever it was that Keynes proposed? 15 hours a week, I think Keynes said it could be with the gains that he foresaw. And of course, that didn't happen because people chose differently, right? So we still have to make those choices. but those same opportunities are available. So you asked about the moment to moment. How do we get back there, right? We have to make those connections with people who are thinking similarly. I think that, you know, everyone who's in this space of understanding that we need to change needs to think about how they change not only their own behavior, but the system around them in whatever way they can.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean nobody needs to become a saint, right? I mean,
Oh,
people
sure.
do what they can in their context. Right? And that's interesting. Like, again, one of my sort of pet peeves is companies that think that if we just do better business, the world will change. Well, why don't you also work on the regulatory environment that your business
Sure. And is your
operates?
product really imbuing nature or the world with a better quality?
Right. Yes.
You
So
know,
so
that's one thing.
it's holistic, right? So
Yeah.
we're having to redefine what it means to be in the world and where our relationships are, both as individuals and also as entities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, when you walk into a room, I'm curious of this. What's your first thought?
My first thought is a feeling. Like, what does it feel like?
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, what does it feel like? Like, what's the energy?
See, now that goes back to what I said about we can't think our way through a system built on vibration. We must sense our way through. So to become present, to sense, to open yourself up to what's there, your whole body's engaged at that point, not just your brain,
Yeah, that's right.
which is a holistic system in itself. There is
Yeah.
no brain-body boundary or barrier. It's all connected.
Yes, and we have the capacity. So that was a trick question. I stepped right into it, didn't I?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yes, you
But
did.
that's right. But that's
Oh,
right.
and thank you
We're
for stepping into it so well.
yeah, of
Cool.
course.
Well, we have had this just amazing conversation today, Andrew, and I really appreciate your insight, wisdom, your tenure in the field, and the success that you've had to date and will have as a result. So I thank you for that and am honored that we've had this time together and humbled by our ability to communicate what we have.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Great questions, provocative, right? Which is just what I expect from you. So it's been a pleasure. Thanks for doing the work you're doing.
It's my pleasure, and I don't. It's just who I am, right? Um,
Yeah,
and it's an honor to be who I am.
yeah. I mean, that's you're honoring the sacred within you by being who you are, I
Mm,
would say. Uh, and and we need to do that, right? We as in everyone.
absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. So wonderful. I will catch up with you at some point. We will meet again soon, I'm sure. And I thank you for being with us, and also namaste and in la catch. Thank you, our audience, for sticking with us for this wonderful conversation. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and I will see you next time.